truth is that the Russians invaded Ukraine. I mean, first in 2014, but then in February 2022. So it's all very well to say there's an escalation when you have probably somewhere around 150, 200,000 war dead and another 500,000 casualties in Russia. So, the way this stops is for Russia to move its troops out of Ukrainian sovereign territory, of which it has given territorial guarantees in 1994, amongst other times. So, I mean, I think the first thing is that these missiles, when they say long range, I think most people imagine that means that the Ukrainians are going to try and bomb Moscow. The range is about 200 miles, which is not enormous. And part of the aim of these missiles, as the report says in the Times, is to try to also target North Korean soldiers who've just been deployed around the Kursk Enclave to try to concentrate mines in Pyongyang as much as in Moscow.
And Joe Biden has allowed Ukraine to use American-supplied long-range missiles for the first time. The permission from the outgoing US president follows Russia's biggest coordinated attacks on Ukraine for months, leaving 10 people dead and many cities in blackouts. Meanwhile, 10,000 North Korean troops are being moved to support Russia at the border. Now, the military expert Karen von Hippel told us she thinks it's unlikely this policy could have unwanted escalating effects.
Personally, I don't think so, given that the U.S. government is about to change. And I think President Putin is looking forward to sitting down with President Trump. So I don't think he would do anything to rock the boat in a significant way. But it really does matter to Ukraine. They have until January 20th or till the U.S. inauguration, till the changeover in the United States, to try to make some changes on the ground, because everybody anticipates there will be a negotiation. And so the stronger they can be on the ground, the better for them. And also, of course, they need to protect their cities and civilian areas from these glide bombs that are coming in from far away. And so these missiles, the use of these missiles will make a big difference.
Peter, I don't want to overstate this. And obviously people like Sergei Markov, it's in their interest to talk in certain terms and get everyone incredibly worried and kind of hot about this. But does this feel like quite a fragile moment, really, this handover of power, really, between Biden and Trump? And were you surprised, actually, that Joe Biden went with this?
Well, I think a couple of things. I mean, Sergei Markov, it's all very well to say that nobody wanted the First World War. I mean, the truth is that the Russians invaded Ukraine. I mean, first in 2014, but then in February 2022. So it's all very well to say there's an escalation when you have probably somewhere around 150, 200,000 war dead and another 500,000 casualties in Russia. So, the way this stops is for Russia to move its troops out of Ukrainian sovereign territory, of which it has given territorial guarantees in 1994, amongst other times. So, I mean, I think the first thing is that these missiles, when they say long range, I think most people imagine that means that the Ukrainians are going to try and bomb Moscow. The range is about 200 miles, which is not enormous. And part of the aim of these missiles, as the report says in the Times, is to try to also target North Korean soldiers who've just been deployed around the Kursk Enclave to try to concentrate mines in Pyongyang as much as in Moscow. But I think that the window that Biden is very sensitive to, and I think the defense side in Washington, is not that this is a desperate attempt by Biden to escalate into the Third World War. It's more pragmatic than that, which is that when Trump takes power in January, the logic would be that Putin will try and behave and be a good boy to try to say, look, he's done nothing wrong, and we'll calm things down. So the worry is that, in fact, the opposite, that it's the Russians will escalate over the course of the next 2 months. And that the reason to make this announcement is to try to concentrate minds to stop the Russians pouring more resource into the war. Because to behave badly for the next 2 months gives Putin something to pull back from and say, well, look, he'll scroll back. So I think it's the other way around to how most of us are looking at this.
Well, what about these, thousands, tens of thousands of, 10,000, but there are reports there are more North Korean troops being moved to support Russia at the border?
Well, I guess you can. It doesn't tell you that the Russian army fancies its chances to bring in essentially mercenaries from another country. Some of the reports, which are probably true, that North Korean troops have never been able to look at the internet before because of surveillance and restrictions in North Korea. So they spend a lot of their time looking at online pornography, and therefore they may not be in the best condition to be fighting anyway. But I think that the Russian war machine is trying to pull on every single resource that it can. And that's not just North Korean troops, it's North Korean armaments. Typically, they've been sold by the Russians over the last 20 or 30 years, but also reaching deeper and deeper into Russia's economy to fund the war, because, it's very expensive to fund a war. interest rates in Russia are now above 20%. They're subsidized by the government. And there's been a real draw on Russia's sovereign wealth to try to finance something that most normal Russians don't really understand what their objectives are in Ukraine.
Jenny, many questions, but so what do you make of those two things then? The 10,000 North Korean troops being moved to support Russia at the border and Joe Biden allowing Ukraine to use these long-range missiles for the first time?
I think, first of all, 10,000 sounds like a very big number, but this is a war of enormous numbers. And I think Russia goes through thousands of troops every day. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a massive number, but it's quite important symbolically because it shows there is this growing anti-Western alliance of Russia, North Korea, perhaps Iran as well. And as ever, Ukraine is the battleground for these geopolitical forces clashing against each other. And, Joe Biden has 2 months left. He's thinking about his legacy. So far, his presidency has meant this disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, a failure to rein Israel in or release hostages in Gaza. And I think he is thinking about the mark that he is going to make. What's really interesting about all of this is that he has dithered on long-range missiles for months. This is a self-imposed restriction. There's nothing in international law that says you can't use these weapons. And this has been really publicly briefed. Russia has been really warned quite far in advance that this is going to happen. So this is something that might look a lot more serious than it actually is. And, it is Russia's most powerful weapon in all of this is time. They invaded the first time in 2014. They bide their time. They're on a much broader scale when it comes to numbers of troops or amounts of time than we can ever really consider. So whilst this sounds, very urgent at the moment, I think they're playing a much longer game.
And what's your opinion then of, well, the first question, which is probably rhetorical, is why on earth has he waited till now to do this, Joe Biden? I mean, it's, there's a very short or small window. And if he does go ahead with this, what do you think Donald Trump will do about this when he gets into the White House on January the 20th?
Well, I think he's waited so long to do this because he hasn't really wanted to do anything. He's a very conservative president, really, when it comes to all of these matters, and it's a final roll of the dice. And only Donald Trump knows for sure what he's doing, but most people would assume that he is going to encourage Ukraine to give Russia some ground. Russia already has just under a fifth of Ukraine is occupying there, and I think most people believe that Donald Trump is going to make the case that they should be allowed to keep it.
Yeah, and how he does that and whether that works seems to be such an open question, and whether he does say what he's going to do, whether he does what he says he's going to do, is also an interesting question with Trump, isn't it?